Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to the 20th episode of Dirty Chess Tricks. In this episode, I am going to show you some of the wonderful tricks in the Italian LaBourdonnais variation from the black perspective. The Italian game arises after the move order e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, and now the move bishop to c5. Now instead of bishop to c5, in my 10th episode of Dirty Chess Tricks, I have covered the move knight to f6, which leads to the Drexler counterattack. So if you are an attacking player and you're looking for a tremendous attacking line, then you should certainly look out for that video. After the move bishop to c5, if you check the mega database or any live book, you are going to find out the main move over here is the c3. Now apart from c3, white can also castle on the king side and then plays the c3. But more or less it comes to the same story. The big idea after the move c3 is white wants to expand with the move d4 and grab the center quickly in the opening. And that's why the main move over here is knight to f6, which immediately pressurizing the e4 square and somehow preventing the move d4. But as usual, I'm going to recommend you something very tricky, and here in this position, instead of the move knight to f6, I propose you should continue with the move d6, which at first sight looks very horrible because black is not pressurizing the e4 square, and that means white can straightforwardly grab the center with the move d4. But believe it or not, this is exactly black wants. Now apart from d4, white can also play the castle and then play the d4, which leads to the same variation. The only thing which I am not covering in this lecture, that is the move d3, known as a modern Italian game. So you need to go through the theory section and find out a replica against that line. Okay, let's see what's the big idea after white plays the obvious move d4. Well, here black should certainly capture this pawn, and after pawn captures and bishop to b6, at first sight it looks like white has a wonderful center, but if you closely look at it, right now these two pieces are attacking the d4, and if white is not careful, then bishop to g4 comes into the mix, and sooner or later white has to give up the center or push this pawn, which will not create a pleasant scenario for the white. Once again, if you check the mega database or live book, you are going to find that in almost all the tournaments, more than 70% of the people has played the move h3, and it is very logical because that way white is stopping the move bishop to g4. But here black reveal his trick after the move knight to f6. Well, it's very funny that at first sight it looks like white has a problem on d4, but now black has really tricked the white and shows that the real problem exists on the e4 square. Here white has mainly tried the three reply. Amongst them, e5 is the worst of all, because after the simple reply d captures e5, no matter however white recapture, he is going to be the material down. So for example, if d captures e5, then after queen captures, king captures, and the move knight to e4, white is simply going to lose a pawn. So that means e5 is not possible at this point. Let's look at other two replies. The first move I want to consider over here is knight to c3. Well, after this, black has this dazzling sacrifice, knight captures e5. Now, as I have highlighted over here, white has few choices. Amongst them, castle is the main move. But apart from the castle, we should see what will happen if white plays other moves. For example, here, if bishop captures f7, then the simplest is you capture this bishop, and after knight captures e4, you play the move rook to e8. So pinning that knight, obviously white can escape from the pin via the move castle. The idea is if you play the move rook captures e4, then knight to g5 will nab the exchange. So obviously we are not going to fall for that, but instead of that, black has a better move, that is king to g8. And now this is the pretty much situation you are going to see in most of the scenario. So what actually happened in all of this line is black will get this bishop pair, and white has this isolated d pawn which will be the target for the rest of the game. So it's a kind of positional trick where first of all black create a weakness in the white camp, and then black try to exploit that weakness throughout the game. Now to illustrate this, I like to show you some games in this line. Here my opponent, who is 1700 rated, he continue with the move knight to g5. So his idea is to play the move queen to b3, but then black's one reply d5 and white is in a serious trouble. My opponent continued with his tricky journey by playing the move queen to d3. I replied with the move g6, and now black has a simple threat of bishop to f5 and then h6 and nabbing the knight. So after a long thought, my opponent continued here with the move knight to e1. So he just want to release the space for the knight, but doing so he forgot that white d pawn hangs, and after the continuation, that is bishop to f5, queen to d1 and knight to d4. Not only black is ahead in material, but look at the black pieces. They are far ahead in the development. So bishop to f7 doesn't work very well. The second option white can try over here is knight captures e4, but then black will regain his piece after the move d5. Now here if white castle or play the move bishop to g5, then it will transpose to the line which we are going to look at the later part. So the biggest question arises, what black should do after white capture this pawn? Well, after bishop captures, black should certainly capture this piece, and after the move knight to c3 and queen to c4, now you can see the dark side of the whole transaction. As I mentioned earlier, not only white has created a deadly weakness on his camp, but at this point white cannot castle on the king side. This is a course of my game against 1900 rated opponent, where he continued with the critical move d5. I responded with the move knight to b4, so there is a threat of knight to d3 check. My opponent parried with the move knight to e5, also hitting my queen. I responded with the move queen to d4. So now black has some severe threats. The main threat is queen captures f2 with a checkmate, and also black is hitting this weak knight. Kindly note, if black at this point plays moves such as queen to e2 or castle on the king side, then black can continue with the castle on the king side, and in those positions black always obtain a slight advantage. So in this game my opponent continued with the move queen to a4 check. I replied with the move c6, and now the black threat remain as it is. So my opponent continued with the move castle on the king side. So its tactical idea is, if I capture this piece, then my own knight hangs. But here I played a very strong move, that is knight captures d5, and now black is a simple pawn off, where white doesn't have a single compensation. Okay, let's look at the most critical reply, that is castle on the king side. Now castle creates a nasty idea that if black foolishly capture this knight, then rook to e1 creates some devastation on the black king side. But of course black is not going to fall for that, and here black has a better move, that is castle on the king side. So at this point black is a clear pawn up, so that's why white is forced to capture this piece. Afterwards we are going to continue with the move d5. Now practically there are three good replies exist over here. Amongst them, bishop to d3 is the worst one, because after pawn captures, bishop captures and knight captures, black is simply a pawn up, so that's not good. If bishop captures d5 at this point, which is somewhat better than the last line, because here white has already castled on the king side, but nevertheless black will continue with the move queen captures, and after knight to c3 and queen to d6, we obtain our same pattern, that is we get bishop pair and white has a loose target on the d4. Now here if white continue with the passive move such as bishop to e3, then in those cases black will continue with the move bishop to f5, and then rook comes on the d file and slowly building a pressure on the d pawn. So that means white has to play somewhat active in this position. The only critical reply over here is d5, and after that I'm suggesting you should play the move knight to e7. Now it's all good to say we have a bishop pair and white has an isolated pawn, but the big question is how are you going to exploit this? So to give you this answer, I like to show you one of my game where my opponent was WIM, rated around 2300. At this point she continued with the move rook to e1. I continue with the move bishop to d7, and she played the most aggressive move, that is bishop to g5. Attacking the knight, I defended with the move rook a to e8, and now she revealed his nasty plan, that is knight to e4. After some calculation, I accept this challenge and played the move queen captures d5. My opponent's idea was she wants to play the move bishop captures e7. So now the queen is hanging, so black is forced to exchange the queen, that is queen captures d1. But then white has this wonderful reply, knight to f6 check. Now instead of knight to f6 check, rook captures d1 leads to the same position, but knight to f6 looks somewhat flashy. Here black doesn't have any good choice, black has to accept this piece. Afterwards white reveal his nasty idea, that is rook captures d1. So right now white is attacking two pieces, that is rook on the f8 and bishop on d7. That means black response is forced. Black has to give up the exchange. Rook captures e7, and after rook captures e7, at first glance it looks like black is a simple exchange down with not enough compensation. And I think she has only calculated up till this far. But after black's next reply, that is bishop to e6, it turns out that white rook is not going anywhere. Here my opponent gone into the deep thought, and finally she come up with the move g4. I responded with the move rook to c8, so protecting the pawn. My opponent responded with the move g5. So her idea was if I played king f8, then pawn captures is good for white. But instead of that, I played a stronger move, that is king to g7. She played h4, I captured the pawn. Now here if knight to g5, then rook to g8 is a very strong reply. So white decided to play h captures g5, but that allows bishop to c5, and now white is forced to give up the exchange. So rook captures, pawn captures, and if you look at this position, not only black emerged with an extra pawn, but it's easy to play as a black, where on the counterpart white doesn't have enough compensation. After few moves I managed to win this game. The third tricky move white can try over here is bishop to g5, which has a very sneaky idea that if you foolishly play over here the move f6, then after bishop captures, pawn captures and bishop to b3, white obtain advantage due to the shattered pawn structure on the black king side. So here instead of f6, black has a better move, that is queen to d7. More or less force white to give up the piece back. After bishop captures d5 and queen captures d5, black is attacking the knight, so knight to c3, and now here I'm recommending you should play the move queen to f5. Now once again bishop to e3 leads to the easiest position for the black, so the only critical reply over here is d5. Afterwards I'm recommending black should continue with the move knight to e5, attacking the knight, and after knight captures, queen captures bishop, knight to f3 and queen to g6. I think these positions are very easy to play as a black, as black has a wonderful bishop pair looking at the white king side, and don't forget this evergreen weakness on the d5 square. I got this position against a FIDE master, and I have included the whole game in the PGN, which is available in the description. So kindly go through the PGN. The third and the final move white can try over here is castle on the king side. Against it, well, you can play the move knight captures e4, but I will prefer the castle first. The reason is it gives more option to white go wrong. Now there are mainly three replies has been tried by the white. Amongst them, if your opponent plays the move knight to c3, then after knight captures e4, we transpose to the line which we have already gone through. And the second move, that is bishop to g5, which is amazingly enough even a higher ranked player has tried it, but in this position it is outright mistake. The simple reason is after h6, no matter however white plays, his position is not good. So for example, if bishop captures f6, then the simplest is you capture with the queen, and now the d4 pawn hangs, and if white foolish enough to play the move d5, then after queen captures attacking the rook, knight to d2 and the move knight to d4, black simply emerged with an extra pawn. Now instead of bishop captures f6, what happened if bishop to h4? Well, here black can seriously create problems for the white after the move g5. Kindly note, if bishop to g3 at this point, then after knight captures e4, black again simply a pawn up, and if white goes with the tactical line, that is knight captures g5, hoping to gain some attack on the king side, well, it's just a fake imagination, because after pawn captures and bishop captures, black can simply capture the d4 pawn, and not only it's attacking the b2 square, but black can simply defend his king side with the moves such as king to g7, rook to h8, and in fact it is black who is having all the fun in this line. The third and the main move at this position is rook to e1. Afterwards we are going with our same strategy, that is knight captures e4. Here white doesn't have any options, white has to accept this piece. Afterwards we are going to play the move d5. Now the whole complex of the lines we have seen so far, amongst them this line is the most accurate by the white. Although white loses his bishop pair, white gains some sort of initiative after the move knight to c3. But no matter, black is already equalized, and after the move queen to d8, white has the only move which keeps his initiative, that is the move d5. Here I'm recommending you should play the move knight to e7, and it is amazing that after knight captures e4 we get such a lovely position where black has a bishop pair and there is an isolated d pawn which give enough counter to the black. Now to illustrate this, I like to show you my game against a FIDE master, which will highlight how you should continue from here onwards. Here my opponent continued with the move bishop to g5, so attacking the knight. Here I responded with the move f6, and my opponent played the move bishop to f4. I developed my last piece with the move bishop to f5. My opponent plays rook to e2, and now I reroute my bishop with the move bishop to g6. At this point my opponent grabbed the opportunity to dissolve his weak pawn with the move d6. And this is the strength of a good player. He knows that he has a weakness and he is just get rid of this weakness at the right time. No matter, I continue with the move c captures d6. My opponent captured with the bishop. So at first sight it looks very scary, but in the long run it's a good for black. I calmly play over here rook to e8, getting out of the pin. My opponent gave me this check, and I played bishop to f7, and now his idea is to play the move queen to a3. Well, so far white's play is very energetic, but now his attack is running out of the fuel. And now it is black who is going to show what actually attack means. Here I continue with the move knight to f5, attacking the bishop. My opponent captured the rook. I capture with the queen, and his idea is to gain a tempo on the queen with the move rook to e1. No matter, I continue with the move queen to c6, and now that bishop has to move. In the game my opponent decided to play bishop to f4, but it turns out that this is a big time mistake. Before I move on, I like you to pause this video and find out what is the wrong with the move bishop to f4. Okay, I hope you find this wonderful continuation, which in my game I found out after a very deft calculation. The move is g5, attacking the bishop, and after the move bishop to h2, black has this dazzling move. Bishop captures f2. Bam! So white doesn't have any good choices. White has to accept this, and after king captures f2, Black revealed his cunning idea with the queen check. The problem is, after king to e2 and rook to d8, this king is going to checkmate it in the next move with the bishop to c4. So white has to stop it. My opponent played the only reply, that is b3, stopping bishop to c4. But then he has to face queen check, king to f1, and now queen captures c3. And after the whole sequence, it turns out that it is black who is having the great advantage. My opponent continued his aggression with the move queen captures a7. I responded with the move bishop to d5. He played queen to b6, attacking my rook. I simply dropped back to the a8, where it is attacking on a2. And now my opponent finally decided to retrieve his queen in the defense of a2 pawn as well as to the king. Now here, of course, black has so many good moves, but I decided to play this sequence, that is bishop captures, queen captures, queen captures, pawn captures, and now rook captures. And I was damn sure that this is completely winning for the black. The rook is attacking bishop. My opponent played bishop to c7. I attack one more time with the move rook to c2. He played bishop to a5, but after king to f7, king to g1, and now the move knight to d4, white is about to lose his second pawn, and there is nothing he can do about it. My opponent replied with the move rook to f1, but after knight captures b3, he simply realized that there is no point of playing this game further. That's it, guys. I hope with this brief analysis you are confident enough to include this secret weapon in your chess repertoire. Kindly go through the PGN where I have shown some line in detail. Once again, thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment on this video, and I'll meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care.
Doing your best again. Obviously, I've been doing
your best means doing your best. I don't know why you don't understand English.
Have you ever imagined that none of your piece comes out in the board and still you are creating a trap? That sounds like impossible, right? But that is exactly the situation is over here.